I begin by congratulating the conference organizers, Birla Global University and City University of New York. And it's wonderful to see a truly global participation. So good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to all of you. And a special shout out to Deans Nayak and Dean Joanne, who are the conference co-chairs. Wonderful organization. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but I'm participating from Pune, a city about 200 kilometers from Mumbai on the west coast of India. And I know people are participating from various places. I want to also particularly commend Dean Joanne for a very forceful speech. I think you put the finger on the key button issues. So I will confine my remarks to the following. I know I would like to particularly address the young MBA students or business students or students of economics and business. So I hope my comments will be of relevance to them. I'm going to deal with 4 questions or 5 questions. Number 1, the topic for the conference, as you know, is post-pandemic economic equity in the post-pandemic world. So my questions that I want to give my remarks on are: number 1, has inequality increased? Number 2, why is inequality bad? Number 3, how much inequality should we live with? Number 4, what can we do about it? By we, I mean as citizens, as corporates, as government, as volunteers. So now that's number 3. And the last question is, what does it mean? What does the future tell us? What is the prognosis? So the reason I want to go through these 4 or 5 questions is the following: that the concept of inequality or equity, you will be shocked to know, economics is completely silent. The idea of equity, the idea of fairness, equitable distribution, economics broadly as a subject is silent on this. Dean Joanne said, it's not about charity. She quoted Nelson Mandela, poverty alleviation is not about charity, it's about justice. But in economics, mainstream economics, when you study economics as a subject, it is silent on the concept of fairness, of equity, equitable distribution, or even justice. That is not to say that these topics are very important. They're extremely important. But when you study economic growth, we study about how resources can be combined in productive and efficient manner so as to increase aggregate welfare, so as to increase aggregate economic growth, more production, more consumption, more investment, more employment. But how is that to be distributed? Whether one consumption is more fair compared to another consumption, economics is largely silent. You may be shocked to know, but this is true. So my first question is, has inequality in the world increased? And on that, I think we have a complete consensus. I hope none of you need to be persuaded that economic inequality has increased in the world. I think Dean Joanne talked about it, Dr. Harivansh, Dr. Chaturvedi talked about it, that whether you measure it in terms of income, Dr. Chaturvedi said that the top 1% in India, they corner or they account for 22% of national income. This is data according to the World Inequality Report, I think World Bank or something. I mean, this is as authentic as it can get. So inequality has increased in terms of income, in terms of wealth, even in terms of other dimensions like gender, across gender or across geographies. There are backward regions in India, there are relatively better off regions, and that inequality is widening. So I don't think we need to spend time on this debate. Inequality has increased for sure, whichever way you measure it. Number 2, why is inequality bad? Economics is silent on this. When you have high economic growth, not everybody is exerting themselves to the same extent. Not everybody is as talented or as efficient or as productive. So when you have high economic growth, it means that there are certain sectors in the economy which are doing well. For example, in India, the IT and software industry is doing very well because they're extremely talented people and they're competing in the global arena. So naturally, their sector grows at 20, 30%. But the Indian economy does not grow at 30%. The Indian economy grows at only 8 or 7%. So if some people are growing at 30, 35%, it means that some other people are growing only at 1%. If everybody's income is increasing, it still means that some people are growing richer, faster, and some people are growing richer, slower. You may or may not agree with what Dean Joanne said, that she said the rich are getting richer, but the poor are getting poorer. I am saying that even if the poor are not getting poorer, you still have widening inequality because the growth process is inequality inducing. And that's, that's the way it is. It's at this stage, you can't say it's good or bad, because if you want high economic growth, you got to have people who are talented, you got to have people who are innovative and productive, exert much more, and therefore you'll have. So my question is, why is inequality bad? Because at some point of time, this leads to social instability. The haves and have-nots, if that gap becomes wider, it will lead to social instability. It will lead to problems of law and order. It will lead to investors becoming nervous. It will lead to situations where investors will become risk averse and they will go away. They will not want to invest in societies which become polarized. That's an instrumental view of inequality, that inequality is bad because eventually it will deter investors. It will lead to stagnant investment. It will make people run away. But there is also a basic reason why inequality is bad, because human beings by nature are empathetic. There is enough research now from neurobiology. When you hear a child crying in the other room, instinctively, whether you're a man or woman, rich or poor, you feel something in your heart if there's a child screams, a baby screams in the other room. Empathy is in our very neurons. So inequality is bad not just because of the instrumental view that it will deter investment. It is also bad because human beings are empathetic and they don't like to see inequality around them, stark inequality. So that's the second question. The third question, how much inequality should we live with? Now, you see, you can never have perfect equality. Dr. Chaturvedi talked about the Gini coefficient. It is utopian to think that we will go to 1. Never. In fact, the growth process, as I just told you, induces inequality because we want the winners to run faster and when we want the laggards to catch up. There is going to be a gap. So think of inequality as pollution. If you want industrial progress, if you want industrial production, factories are going to spew smoke. But how much smoke is okay? If you want zero smoke, you better go back to the Stone Ages, or go back to the pre-agriculture age. If you want, but if you are going to live in an industrial society, industrial economy, or a consumer economy, when you drink that bottle of Coca-Cola or Pepsi, or when you consume that ice cream in a Tetra Pak or milk, all that is contributing to some amount of pollution. So pollution is inevitable. We need to control it. Same thing with inequality. There is something called optimal inequality, and you got to think about it. All societies have to decide how much inequality is okay. That's a political and sociological decision. That's not for economists to say. How much inequality is okay? The Scandinavian countries, Finland, as Dr. Chaturvedi said, they prefer very low inequality. Some of the South American economies, Latin American economies, or even India, we tend to be okay with slightly higher inequality. But that is for every society to decide. Next question, second last question. What can we do about it? It is not inequality reduction is not to be left only to governments and policymakers. It is part of the Sustainable Development Goals. Collectively, as United Nations, we have decided that. I want to, by the way, tell Dean Joanne, there is a difference between poverty and inequality. We, of course, want to eliminate poverty because we don't want anybody to go hungry. But reducing poverty does not automatically reduce inequality. Inequality is the widening of the gap. So I'm saying that the reduction in inequality is not only the responsibility of governments or policymakers, but also all of us. And it is here, I must say that the corporate good corporate citizens, or all of us actually have a role to play. We, of course, a very passive role to play is by contributing to taxes, by being productive ourselves, in fact, by pursuit of excellence, we actually contribute to the well-being of others because our tax revenue goes to fund public programs. But as you know, India is one of the only countries in the world which has actually passed a law where post-tax, after paying taxes, companies are required to set aside 2% towards corporate social responsibility. In the years ahead, I think the private sector is going to take a leading role in this poverty reduction. In fact, the pandemic, unfortunately, has resulted in not only inequality increasing very, very rapidly, but also, unfortunately, poverty. Poverty was declining in the world and in India, in many countries, even though inequality was increasing. But now we have both increase in inequality and in poverty. And this is a result of the pandemic. No, the virus does not respect even if you're a billionaire. You may be a rich man or a poor man. You may be living in a city or a rural area. The virus is equally potent. In India, we found it, unfortunately, many people discovered that however much money you have, you can't get oxygen. There were oxygen shortages, there were vaccine shortages, there was medicine shortages, the shortage of beds. So this is just like the virus taught us about empathy. I think inequality is the same lesson. Lastly, about students. So I think the Birla Global University students or City University of New York, you are a very blessed and very, you guys are in a very privileged place. You guys are going to do very well. The inequality in society means that the talented guys get rewarded disproportionately. So you will not only have a very good careers, you will make handsome wealth and income. You will lead a good, healthy life. So I think the responsibility on you, especially the business students who are in this room or in this audience, it is much more on you to recognize what I just said in the first 3 points. Why we need to pursue this, and you have an extra responsibility, and you are going to be earning, saving, investing, creating wealth in the next decades of your life, and therefore you have to pay particular attention. It's not just governments and not just policymakers, but you. So thank you for giving me the opportunity, and I wish you all good day.